Hello and welcome to UX Leadership by Design, podcast by and for UX design leaders. I'm your host, Mark Baldino. This podcast is and always will be brought to you by Fuzzy Math, the user experience design consultancy that brings consumer grade UX to the enterprise. At Fuzzy Math, we deliver award-winning digital product design, and we love to partner with internal UX teams to help them grow and scale their impact. Today on the podcast, we're talking to Greg Thomas. He's the Director of User Experience at TaxSlayer, which, as the name suggests, is in the tax preparation space. And he's going to walk us through how they drive decisions at TaxSlayer from a design perspective. And they do that by capturing data at certain very specific times in context or in situ with their users. So after somebody completes an action, they measure the experience that the customer just had. They do that throughout. So they have this really rich picture of the data, but not too much data, as Greg will explain. And that data helps them drive decisions and make their case to executives, leadership, business owners, product. So it's really, I think, interesting. It's very much just Greg describes how they went about the process of implementing it and then how it can drive decisions. So I think you're all going to love it. I appreciate you listening. So enjoy. Greg, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Mark?
I am doing very well. Thanks for asking. And thank you for joining us on the podcast today. Super excited about some of the content we're going to be chatting with or chatting about. I like to ask people to give us a little bit of background on you and your role. And I'm always really interested in the shift from being a team member, an individual contributor to, now you're a director of user experience at TaxSlayer. Like, what was that transition like from a individual contributor to a lead?
Well, a little bit about me. I started off my career professionally promoting monster truck shows and motocross races.
Unreal.
So I'm the poster boy for all those people out there that were doing something else and then found their way to UX.
Oh man.
So I've been doing this work for, maybe 15 years now. I've worked for Peapod and Walgreens, Motorola, TaxSlayer, a couple startups, kind of been all over the place. So that's enough about me. The transition from being a contributor to being a leader, it has its challenges, but there's a ton you could probably identify and talk about. The one that I think you have to get the hang of really crucially and really quickly, because it cascades into all your other conversations about design work, about working with clients, about working with internal people, is that you have to learn to prioritize the challenges that you want to have. So, just today there was a collaboration session on a design that we were working on that we wanted to A/B test. What the group wanted to A/B test, I really don't think it was a good design. But because I'm having a challenge with that group on another topic, I'm going to let that first one go and work on the other topic, which is more important. So that's, that speaks to the project specific aspect of like what you have to get used to is making those trade-offs and quickly making the decision of this one's not worth it. I've got to go on, and I've got to go on because I have people that are counting on me to do other things. So I can't let myself get too, mired in things that when I was an individual contributor, I was expected to know.
Yep. Why do you think that that's a challenge for some folks? I mean, at the individual contributor level, very tied to your designs, you're putting your heart and soul into them, present it to a group of people, and maybe they say, we don't think this is a great idea. Like, how did you start to realize, is it just a separation from those ideas, bigger picture? Like, what was that? What's that process? I think it's a challenge for a lot of designers to separate.
Yeah, it is a challenge because you spend so much of your career worrying about every little detail, which is really, in my opinion, is the crux of experience design, is catching all the little details over and over and over so that they never get through. So it's a challenge. When did I start to really recognize that? It got real simple for me because of the way that I set teams up, I was off working on projects before they would get to the ICs and discussing the requirements and the business case and what problem we were trying to solve with stakeholders, so that then when it got to the ICs, I was able to the individual contributors, I was able to let them take the bulk of the work.
Yeah.
And then if there was something pertinent to the conversations I had had earlier, I would chime in on that aspect. But I trust that you have to trust your people once you start to be a leader to do what you're empowering them and you're paying them to do. You have to let go of it, and you learn real quick because you're having maybe 10 conversations a day about stuff that's coming down the pipe. You have no choice. You learn real quick to pivot your focus and start start talking about this thing. We were talking about login and registration before. Now we're going to talk about cart and checkout. Now we're going to talk about search. I need to get just enough so that I can scope it and so I can have a rough idea of how long it will take. And then I need to get it to the contributors so that they can do what they do, which is look for the rest of the details.
Got it. So you talked about separation from personal connection to maybe what you're working on. You're kind of thinking a little bit bigger picture. How are you doing the mental gymnastics of always shifting priority and importance? Like for you, what does important mean? And does that align with the rest of either your team, maybe the leads you're working with, maybe even organizationally? Like, do you have your own set of priorities or are they aligned at a higher level?
That's a really good question. What I typically try to do is to think about the things that I want to accomplish from an experience perspective, okay, which are things that are germane to me. I know how I'm going to say those. I know where I want the experience to go. I try to roll those needs into the conversations I have with stakeholders. And then, you work back and forth to make sure that I'm listening and understanding their needs. And then I'm just going to roll a lot of my needs in. And then if I have to prove something to them on an experience standpoint, then we'll talk about it. Otherwise, I'll just roll things in and get it done and then show them later on and say, we fixed the kerning on this and we changed the H1 and yada, yada, yada. I try to layer those things in so that it's less of a big deal, less of a I'll say showing off for lack of a better term. It's less of UX saying, look at the great things we did. It's more like, here's the great thing we did that meets your needs. And here's something we included that meets the user's needs. Yeah. You have to talk to people on their language. You have to be able to speak the language of business to product managers. You have to be able to speak the language of marketing to marketers, on and on. You have to be able to speak the language of healthcare when you're talking to pharmacists, Yeah. So they don't care that I'm concerned about the cognitive load on the user when they hit this specific page. That's not what they're going to come to you and say. What they're going to come and say is, I'm not getting people past this page. Help me figure out why. I'll say, okay, we'll fix these things from a design perspective. And then, we'll do these other things, that help you out. And then I'll come back and talk about those. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. I mean, you kind of describe stakeholders as coming with their background, opinion, needs, presenting to you. First goal is to speak their language. I think that's really important for designers who want to be leads to learn that we need to empathize with those stakeholders. We need to recognize the value they bring to the business, but what are their concerns or needs? And so it's speaking the language, understanding them, and then meeting those needs. But I think what you said was also kind of adding your human-centered or user-centered approach of like, hey, we've done A, but we also included B. Do you need more than that to make a pitch? Like, are there ways that your business, and I'm not saying TaxSlayer in particular, but folks you've worked with, like outside of using their language, is there other stuff that you can bring to the table to sell an idea, to push an idea through, to demonstrate importance, not just to us UX folks, but to a broader like business audience?
Yeah, that's another good distinction. When someone brings you work, the onus is on you to speak more of their language, which happens a lot in our world. People bring us business cases that may or may not be true or accurate, and we have to help work with them on those, and that's what they care about. But if there's something that a stakeholder or product manager, whomever, if they didn't bring it to my team, but we have something we want to fix, well, then we're going to use any number of tools to illustrate why this thing we want to fix is important. But any of those tools go back to this idea that we have to be able to tell stories. We have to tell the story of what the user's going through so that the audience can empathize with why this is important and why this should be included into the backlog, to be worked on. And if you can layer into that business reasons that will resonate with them that they didn't know existed, then you're going to get really far, because they're going to say, wow, you're improving the experience and you're coming to me with something that the business would enjoy the support of. So tell a story when you're bringing the work. Otherwise, layer in the things important to you.
What's an example of something that's resonated with business that you've sort of layered into a story?
Oh gosh. So a lot of times, well, we can take forms, for example. You can imagine that, Luke Robluski would be happy to know, like, he makes an art out of creating forms. But there's different things you can do to forms that will pull different levers, right? So if we have a form where a person needs to slow down and, absorb the information more, then we'll highlight that we're using that form pattern and here's why we used it, and explain to them that, like, this is actually going to be better so that people remember this other thing.
Yeah. It's such an interesting concept of slowing people down, because business tools we work on with our clients, speed and efficiency are important. Accuracy's there, but some people even are like time to task type metrics and KPIs. And the idea that you're trying to slow someone down so that they're more thoughtful, or they remember something from maybe step 4 to step 5 is like that's like a really interesting challenge. And we all love Luke W, but like, are you able to like make that case? Like, this is like, how are you, maybe it's a better question. How are you able to make that case that, like, you want somebody to be more patient and thoughtful in their experience?
Yeah. Well, some of the ways that I like to make the case are storyboards. Storyboards are, very crucial and easy to make. And depending upon your audience, you can make them as high fidelity or as low fidelity as you may want. I really like storyboards. Another way is to, start the pitch off. I'm using pitch in air quotes because internally I don't actually have to do a sales pitch, but your pitch, I might start with a video of the user actually encountering the problem, and then say, okay, we've seen this. Here's the observation. Here's the recommendation, right? So a good example is that in the healthcare space, a lot of healthcare workers become notification blind. They have so many like sounds and things beeping at them, and phones ringing, cell phones ringing, yada yada. So sometimes we have to give them a notification that they need to read. They need to not ignore this one. So we may lay it out differently. We may use a different icon, different color, lots of things that experienced people know. But it's a situation like that where you can come back and you can show a video and say the person flew right through and they didn't ask that customer if they needed to consult a pharmacist. We've got to slow them down so that they remember to ask that question, because if they don't, we're not in compliance with state and federal regulations as a pharmacy.
Yeah. Interesting. How you mentioned user sessions and videos and starting off there. Sounds like that's one way to sort of capture a little voice of the user. What are you all doing either in storytelling or in general around like testing and data and analytics? What information are you capturing, and how does that inform how you, I think pitch is a great word actually, because we do need to, we are salespeople as designers. I'm sorry, but that's just the case, right? We're coming with our own viewpoint, and a lot of times I feel like data can help. What are you all doing to capture that data? How does it inform your design process, decision-making process?
Yeah. So we have probably all the standard tools that the audience for this probably has, right? Like we've got different digital analytics tools that are tracking clicks and views and so on. We have a session replay tool. We have those common ones. One of the ones that I am especially proud of, and I also like, that we use to help determine the severity and the priority of a problem is that inside of our tax application, we have all these different places where when a person finishes that action, we pop up a little survey to them. It's called the SEQ, or Simple Ease Question, and you can read more about it on Jeff Swaros. He has lots of articles for those out there listening. So it's just that one question with a 1 to 7 scale, and it pops up. It's very easy. The person makes their selection and goes on about their business. So we ask that one question at roughly like 75 or 80 different places in our application.
Wow.
To random people. So for example, I might get the survey after I fill out my W-2. Mark, you might get the survey after you complete your Schedule C. I don't get the survey because I don't even do a Schedule C.
Right.
You don't get the W-2. So we have that sampling figured out so that you're not getting, too bothered. But then what we do is we take all the W-2 people, we roll them up, and we get an average of their score. We take all of the Schedule C people, we roll them up, we get an average of the Schedule C score. Then we have just a rank ordering that we can say, okay, here are the 10 lowest performers based on this many respondents to this survey. So the lowest average rating was a 1.7. And we might go up a little bit from there. So then we have that listing, that priority, or that rank ordering, that then we can turn over to business people and say, here is a number where people have actually told us they don't like this particular thing. And because they've told us, that's why that particular thing needs to get, we need to start on it. It needs to be included in the backlog. And here's why. And it's really interesting, business people, the people that are our stakeholders in our industry, they really love numbers. If you can give them a number, even a derived number, such as an SEQ score, they resonate to it. They can look at a list and say, that one's worse because it's a 1.7 than this other one that's a 2.2. That clicks for them, as where people like us, we can look at the Schedule C experience and we know it's not pleasant.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I just want to take a pause because you at the beginning of this described things that kind of everyone has, which I don't think everyone has. I think a lot of designers and leads struggle to have data capture tools, playback sessions. But this sort of integration of SEQ, I've been in the business for 20 some odd years, and very few of my clients or projects I've worked on, platform business application tools, have any sort of in-app monitoring, maybe some basic metrics, but like very rudimentary, like usage of features would be great. But the idea of like capturing an SEQ, a satisfaction score in situ, in context, I think is very, very rare. You reference that your stakeholders are numbers oriented, but a lot of stakeholders are in a lot of organizations. So what was the journey to, because I assume this before you were in this role, they didn't have that, and this was part of your introduction. Like, what was the process of making the case for, we need to track this, we need to track it in this manner? I get that they like the data now, but I think a lot of people are like, I don't know how to make the request. I don't know how to make the story. They don't want to invest in this. This requires technology and like implementate like code and stuff. It's not easy to do. So like, what did that journey look like to get it up and running? Yeah.
So initially, I think that anytime you move into a leadership role, you have to step gingerly and maybe a little bit slowly. Personally, that's my style. I took my time when I first came here, learned from everyone, asked lots of questions. The first thing that I realized was that we struggle to be user-centered here at TaxSlayer for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons is our number of people. We're a small company. We don't have a ton of time to be going out and getting data. One of the other things we struggle with is the seasonality. I can't go and talk to a person about their taxes in September because they're not thinking, they're not in the same headspace. So what I quickly realized was that we need a tool that runs automatically to give the users a voice, that doesn't have any overhead on my team and that's simple. It's not going to give so much data that we get stuck in analysis paralysis type situation. And so the SEQ is something I read about in grad school a long time ago. It's been around for a while, and I just basically was like, well, people kept coming to me during that introduction phase and saying, this one's really bad, isn't it? And I'd say, well, kind of, but is it worse than this one? And I'd say, well, maybe. So then I went back to people and said, okay, remember that question? I think I have a way we can answer that, and it's very simple, and here it is.
And then acceptance, sort of, I'm sure it took a while to sort of integrate that. This is all like homegrown code. You're not using a third-party platform for.
We do use a third party.
Oh, you do use
a third party.
Okay.
The SEQ structure and format is very simple. You can find that out on the internet, and I would just stick to it pedantically so that you don't introduce any variables. And there's any number of survey tools that you can use to drop the code onto your page and then have them collect it. And some of them even have replay tools built into them. And analytics tools. So you might kill multiple birds with one stone, which is going back to the earlier point of I'll layer in stuff that they don't even know I want, and then tell them about it later on. So for our SEQ and replay tool, I have stakeholders that didn't even know that I knew the number of page views from that tool. I know how people are using that page from my tool over here. So I can come back to them and say, I'm getting a different number than you also for something on this page. Oh, and here's the SEQ number. Do you see what I'm saying? So you layer in things that are important to you in the growth and the maturity of the design practice at your company. But then you also find ways to speak about the business needs and explain to people why this is important and show them.
Yeah, I like that I think it's really interesting. You focused on the simplicity, right? We don't need too many. We need signal to noise here, right? We want kind of one thing, plus I can pull playback and tell a pretty comprehensive story, and I have some data to support it. There's also, data can at times say what certain people want it to say. Have you run into any drawbacks or any separation of somebody being like, well, they love this step because they just learned they're getting $5,000 back from the return. They hate this step because it's 50 fields that you have to click through. Like that difference of satisfaction score. How do you ensure it's related to the digital experience that they're having with your tool versus their emotional, state or well-being, given that you're dealing with taxes, which is frankly, a stressful thing.
Yeah. So there's some, in our application, there's some parts that we know are pretty neutral. People don't have a real positive or negative feeling about them as long as they see their refund amount go up. So a good example is the aforementioned W-2. Most everybody gets a W-2 or a 1099 of some sort. The SEQ will measure their feelings about entering that item, right? And then they go on about their business. So we've compartmentalized it. So we know that score speaks to just that specific item. And we're lucky in the tax world. I don't have situations where I might have a page of search results that are all slightly different each time. The W-2 is the W-2. You go through it once, it works. That's where this SEQ notion, it will work for some things, it may not work for others, and you've got to think through it for what works. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. I mean, I was just thinking if there's times when the data tells a story and it's a little bit murky or it's conflicting. It sounds like you're trying to silo these things and measure it, and that gives you enough comfort that it's telling the true story. I guess you probably established a baseline. You know what the W-2 was for, 2021 taxes, and you kind of have a baseline maybe for 2022 that you've been working against or something like that.
Yeah, you work against the baseline, and you just try to make things better. And the first time that you roll these things like this out, any type of survey, I think you get pushback from stakeholders because all they see is a hindrance to their goals, and so you've got to really explain to them the value.
Okay, and so sorry,
I was to say I can't think offhand of times where we didn't have any So far, we haven't had any SEQ scores where they were super low compared to what people would think. There's parts of our application that we know aren't that good. But what we do is we take that SEQ score and we combine it with other metrics such as the number of views, the number of clicks that are happening on a page, and we use that to reinforce and bolster. Like, okay, not only did they tell us it didn't, they don't like it from an SEQ perspective. Um, Here's all the things on the page that they're doing. We can see it. We see them moving around this way. It's not, layer in the other data. Here's the number of views. This particular thing doesn't get many, so I don't think it's that important, product manager, but this other one gets a lot. I really think we should work on this one. And what I'm working on, my next adventure with this whole thing is I want to take the SEQ score and combine it with like the number of views, number of clicks, other digital metrics, and make a composite score. I'm trying to get to the place where I can just show stakeholders, imagine a list of red light, yellow light, green light for all the sections of the app, but that the stoplight is made up of a composite of other pieces of data so that they can just look at it and go, red light here. Tell me again what the red light means, Greg. Oh, it's a weighted composite score so that you know that if this thing says red, don't worry about it, or whatever, however you work the composite. That's what we're trying to get to, but we're a small outfit, so it's going to take some time.
Well, for a small outfit, you've gotten a lot further than huge outfits that we've worked with. So it's really impressive. And I was going to ask you how you're reporting up. I know for specific features, you kind of have the data. It sounds like you're looking to do some roll up, some reports that you would share with sort of senior management that give them here's a heads up of where we are in general. And then here's some problem areas and some areas that are performing well. It seems super valuable.
Yeah. So during season, I don't really do a whole lot. Now that I've won the battle and I've gotten SEQ in and I've sold people on it, and then they've seen the outcome, and we actually use the SEQ values at the board meeting to discuss improvements. During tax season now, I don't really mention it much because it is an average. It needs time to run. It's not a metric that is immediately directionable. It's a metric that you will get direction out of after a period of time. I have the benefit of having a very defined tax season. So we run in a very specific circular kind of way. And so, I can silo it into tax season and keep it simple.
Awesome. It is really super impressive. If you haven't patted yourself on the back, you should, and your team and the broader organization for kind of accepting it. Sometimes people don't want bad news, right? They don't actually they don't want to get a score that they've invested time and energy and obviously dollars into the development of a platform, and customers aren't, satisfied with it. So it's scary, which maybe kind of relates to my last question to kind of wrap up here. Like, why isn't everyone doing this? Why doesn't every tool? I know a lot of e-commerce tools, right? Websites, marketing websites, lots of funnel analysis. Like, they're good at data. It's easy to track the dollars and cents to that. But like tools that we use every day, whether they're consumer facing apps or more, business, or in your case, kind of a mix of both. Like, why aren't people tracking more data?
Yeah. Well, I actually think that in most cases, I think people are tracking too much data. And we don't have a method to bring all those data sources together quickly. I mean, I've got click data, view data, change on field data, multiple touches, the page crashing. I got all these things, but nobody's doing the work to tie them together into something that makes sense. So I actually kind of feel like a lot of places have way more data than they know what to do with. And so that makes it a real hindrance. Like, they stand it up and then they're like, what am I going to do with all this? So I think that's kind of like one problem. I think that another reason why a lot of other people don't do this is that in bigger companies, you might actually have a siloed off group of people that handle research versus the people that actually do the design work. And those people work together, they talk, but it leads to this sort of situation of, you stay in your lane, I'll stay in mine. We'll work together and advise each other, but we kind of stay separate. And when that happens, that's where good leadership comes in. Is that you need to come in and look across all those spaces and say, okay, how are we going to improve our ability to, in my case, make decisions that are truly backed in data.
Yeah, fantastic. It's a hard thing to do. So again, applaud the effort at TaxSlayer and kind of under your leadership of the UX squad to get that up and rolling. Thank you very much for your time today. Thanks for sharing your background and your sort of data informed decision making on the design side, sort of that journey you've gone through. And I wish you and the TaxSlayer team good luck as you're heading into your busy season, I'm sure.
Thank you. Yeah, it's it's already here. And for your listeners out there, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn if you have questions or you want to talk any further. I like to share with everyone as best I can.
That's awesome, Greg. I appreciate that. We'll include a link to your LinkedIn profile and to some of the resources we talked about in the show description. But again, thank you very much for your time today. Much appreciated the conversation.
Thanks, Mark. See you soon.
You bet.